Let's turn our attention to the war in Israel as we near the 7-month mark, and some strong comments from earlier today from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he vowed to invade Rafah with or without a hostage deal in place. I do want to put up this tweet right now from the Prime Minister there in Israel talking about this, and it talks also about the International Criminal Court and potential arrest warrants. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but we want to bring in right now to the conversation senior research analyst at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, Joe Truzman. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And we've heard a lot about the invasion potentially upcoming of Rafah. He's saying now with or without a hostage deal in place. What do we make of this rhetoric from Netanyahu?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. We need to understand here a couple of things. So what do the parties want, right? What does Israel want? What does Hamas want? So first off, Hamas, what it's trying to ensure is its survivability, right? So by doing this, to ensure its survivability, what they're doing is telling Israel, right, and the negotiators that they will not agree to a ceasefire without Israel withdrawing from the Gaza Strip. And Israel does not want to do this, okay? Now, another part of the deal, of course, is the hostages, right, that Hamas has captive, and the other Palestinian terrorist organizations that they're captives that they're holding. Now, I think Israel and these parties, Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, will agree to a transfer of hostages for Palestinian terrorists in the in Israeli jails. But right now, what Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying is that they, regardless of a deal, right, even if one is made, Israel is going to eliminate Hamas, all right, with or without a deal. We have to remember Rafah, right, which is in the southern Gaza Strip, is one of the last remaining areas where Hamas and its battalions, including other members, other terrorist organizations, are operating, right? So Israel needs to go into Rafah if it wants to achieve one of its goals, which is, of course, destroying Hamas or eliminating its capabilities to launch attacks against Israel from the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, and it feels even closer to being inevitable now that this Rafah invasion is coming. And in your opinion, and what you know as well, I do want to put up a tweet from you talking about what exactly an invasion would look like. You said one of the intriguing aspects of an operation is what Israel may find underground. Israel expecting to discover not only Hamas military infrastructure beneath Rafah, but also a potential network of tunnels connecting Gaza to Egypt as well. What does the invasion of Rafah look like, and maybe how many different aspects, like you detailed in that social media post, would they be going after there in that region?
Correct. There are a lot of aspects here, and what's important to understand is that I believe that an invasion of Rafah is not going to be like the invasions of Gaza City or Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. All right, there's not going to be a large ground force that we saw in those operations, and it's not because Israel doesn't want to do this. It's because they are being pressured by the Biden administration, by its allies, not to launch a major ground operation. Okay, and this is the problem here. So what does Israel do? Right, so it has to limit its operations. It will limit its ground forces and its airstrikes in Rafah. But nevertheless, one of the most important things to note here is that what is below ground, what is below Rafah, right? Now, there are tunnels between Rafah, between the southern Gaza Strip and Egypt, where Hamas has established these tunnels to transfer and smuggle weapons. And Israel needs to get to those tunnels. This is why the Rafah operation is very important. But at the end of the day, even if Israel goes into Rafah, eliminates Hamas in Rafah, finds these tunnels, it doesn't mean the end of the war, but it's an important piece to ending the war.
Yeah, and maybe potentially cutting off some of those supplies that we talk about in the various ways they do get it. You also mentioned an interesting component to this, the United States and the relations there, always kind of tense between Netanyahu and Biden as well. And I remember the Biden administration talking about how they want to be informed before a Rafah invasion potentially happens. Do you think the Israeli government will give the United States a heads up if and when this does come down?
Absolutely. I think the United States, or rather Israel, will inform the United States when it is about to invade Rafah. All right. Now, it's important to maintain a relationship for Israel. Rather, it is important for Israel to maintain a good relationship with the United States, even though during these last 6 to 7 months, things have been pretty tense, right? But nevertheless, I do believe there is still a good relationship there. And the Israelis will inform the United States, because we have to understand this, all right? A Rafah operation isn't something that's going to last a few days, all right? This is something that will last weeks, maybe months. This is not like Gaza City. This is not like Khan Yunis. This is a major operation. And if the Israelis are limited in the way they can attack Hamas in Rafah, it only spells out that this is going to take be a long operation. So it benefits both the Israelis and the United States to keep that line open and talk to each other when that Rafah operation occurs.
Yeah, and I believe there was a call between Netanyahu and Biden very, very recently over the last couple of days. I do want to ask you about another kind of component of this, the International Criminal Court there, potentially arrest warrants for Netanyahu and other Israeli officials. And when you hear about the ICC and arrest warrants, you potentially could think about Putin and the arrest warrants for him. How big of a deal would that if the ICC does come down and say there are arrest warrants out for Netanyahu and others?
It's a big deal. It would limit the Israeli government. It would limit Israeli officials from operating, or rather traveling around the world, right? So this is a very important aspect. So, and we can see from reports that it has made the Israelis nervous. All right. So there's diplomatic push by the Israelis and officials in the United States to stop, or at least warn the ICC not to do this. Remember, Israel is in a war here, in the middle of a war against terrorist organizations. And what Hamas wants more than anything right now is for the ICC to issue arrest warrants, because what that would, against Israeli officials, because what that does, all right, it shows that it conveys, or it shows that Hamas has been right about Israel this whole time, which is, we all know it's untrue. So this would be detrimental not only to Israel, it'd be detrimental to the war too.
Very interesting, and this comes ahead of this 7-month mark, approaching it here in about a week or so. I do want to ask you, my last question before I let you go here, Joe, is because we've seen here in the United States the unrest on college campuses, the protests, the demonstrator as well. Just give me a thought from your perspective, because you cover the Middle East, that region, all the Palestinians, the Israelis, so very closely. Can you give me kind of a thought on what this sees and maybe what the perspective is in the Middle East when they see everything going on? Because I'm going to put up just an image there in New York City at the campus, Columbia University, Ivy League institution, kind of world-renowned. What is kind of the region thinking when they see some of these protests there on college campuses?
Right. I think this is important. Two things. You know, I've been researching Palestinian armed groups and other terrorist organizations in the Middle East for years. And what I'm seeing on college campuses during this war, and especially the last few weeks, is a copy-paste of Hamas rallies that have occurred in the West Bank, in Gaza, and other places in the Middle East. I'm seeing this now in the United States on college campuses. It's very concerning. It's deeply troubling to see this. It's not only just signs, these signs that protesters are waving around, but the words that they're using. It's literally the same words I hear in protests or in support of Hamas and other terrorist organizations that I hear in Beirut or in other places in Lebanon or wherever in the Middle East. I'm hearing those same words now in American campuses, and that's troubling. Also, I would say that these protests, they encourage Hamas, they encourage its allies, that their ideology and their hate for Israel is spreading to college campuses, spreading to the United States, right? So it only encourages them. It helps Hamas. So this is what concerns me right now, and it doesn't look good.
Yeah, and that is obviously a concern potentially both for the colleges, but for the Biden administration, the U.S. government, as they kind of watch these things unfold, just to give a larger perspective. All right, Joe, thank you again. Great insight as always. The war continues to go on. We'll potentially keep our eyes for a potential Rafah invasion as well soon. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.